The Milwaukee Brewers have made both a trade and a signing that are going to impact some prospects in 2024. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this your first listen every single day. We're proudly part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today's episode is made possible by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So the hot stove has cooled off a little bit, right? We're coming up on the weekend before Christmas. A lot of the executives are out of the office. Not a lot of stuff has happened, but the Milwaukee Brewers have made a couple different moves. They made a trade with the New York Mets. They made a free agent signing, and it's going to impact multiple different prospects. So the first thing is they traded right-hand pitcher Adrian Houser and center fielder Tyrone Taylor to the New York Mets to get right-hand pitcher Coleman Crowe. Really interesting deal here. Reminder, Coleman Crowe was a 28th round pick in 2019 by the Los Angeles Angels. And don't let the round surprise you. The bonus that they gave him was $317,000, which that year was the equivalent of like fifth round money, right? Doesn't pitch after the draft, no 2020 season, debuts in 2021 for the Angels, spends the year in low A or single A Inland Empire, goes to the Arizona Fall League, and then 2022 is in Double A Rocket City. Little bit of a rough go. 9-3, so the wins are good, although, again, wins don't matter in the minor leagues. 4.85 ERA, and went back to Double A in 2023. And here's where it gets really interesting for Coleman Crowe. Comes out of the gate, looks absolutely absurd, right? 4 starts, 2-0, with a 1.88 ERA. 24 innings, so you're looking at 6 innings a start on average. 31 strikeouts, so 11.6 per 9, which was 2.6 higher than his career mark that he put up in either Inland Empire or Rocket City the year before. And the walks, 6 walks, so 2.3 per 9, which was in line with what he did in Rocket City. Looks really promising. There is a caveat here, right? Double A had that really annoying tacky baseball that everybody hated. And we discussed that tacky baseball in the Double A Southern League. Gave you a lot of additional spin on your pitches. And Coleman Crowe throws pitches that take advantage of that. He has a 4-seam fastball, back to our conversation about vertical approach angle, has a lower release slot, and so very flat vertical approach angle, works really well up in the zone, especially if you can get extra carry because you have a tacky ball. Also threw a sweeper, which was an incredibly high spin pitch. Obviously, it's reasonable to assume, we don't know this, but we can assume the tacky baseball helped Coleman Crowe. We don't know if it's true or not because he had an elbow injury and had Tommy John surgery before the tacky ball went away. He ended up getting moved. Coleman Crowe got moved from the Angels to the Mets in the Eduardo Escobar deal, and now moves from the Mets, having never pitched for them because he had Tommy John soon after the trade, moves from the Mets to the Brewers. Now, what this actual trade does for the Brewers is it answers some of the questions we had about how many outfielders can you reasonably carry on a roster at any given time. So Adrian Houser, it's tough to think about Adrian Houser leaving simply because he was one of the longest tenured Brewers left on that team. So absolutely just wild was arbitration eligible, so going to save them some money. And then Tyrone Taylor goes with Houser. And so now your outfield at the major league level could project out depending on how you aligned everybody. Christian Yelich could be your full-time DH. And if that happens, you could put Garrett Mitchell in left. You could put Jackson Chourio. Obviously, we talked about this a couple weeks ago when I was at the winter meetings. He signed the largest contract for any player to have not yet debuted in MLB. The path is open for him to be the opening day center fielder if the Brewers so choose to do that. You can put Sal Frelick in right. So Mitchell, Chourio, Frelick would be, I believe, one of the youngest outfields in baseball. Frelick's 23, Chourio's 19. I think Mitchell's 25, maybe. Gives you two lefties and a righty because Chourio's a righty. And then your bench could be Joey Wiemer. And then you still have, I would assume, a guy like a Blake Perkins would probably start the year in AAA. But you've got just a ton of outfield options. And then to go along with this trade, right, you then signed Eric Haas, former top prospect, to be the backup catcher behind William Contreras. Contreras and his backup, Victor Caratini, covered every single inning last year for the Brewers. And despite Atlanta having such a great catching tandem of Sean Murphy and Travis d'Arnaud, Brewers catchers were number one in baseball in F-WAR at 6.2, and they were second in offense, a 117 WRC+. So Eric Haas now comes in as the backup catcher in Milwaukee, and again, former top 30 in Cleveland system, spent time obviously with Cleveland and Detroit, but a guy that had played some outfield as well as catcher. So you don't necessarily have to, obviously you have plenty of outfield depth, you don't have to use him, but it's just funny that the guy you sign ends up being a guy that has experience in the outfield. But what this does now is I think this allows the Brewers to slow play Jefferson Chourio. Their number 2 prospect, obviously Jackson Chourio is number 1, but Jefferson Chourio, one of the better catchers in baseball, spent the entire season in Double-A Biloxi, again in the Southern League last year, batted .262, .339, .441 in 90 innings, 38 walks to 68 strikeouts, hit 16 home runs, and had 28 extra base hits. I think Jefferson Chourio's defense is phenomenal. His arm is phenomenal. The issue is offensively. And it's not that he's bad. He just needs more polish. He's a very aggressive hitter. And times when he struggles against really good off-speed stuff, it felt like whenever I got a chance to see him play with Biloxi that he could be susceptible to spin off the plate. And if you would mess up on a pitch, he would absolutely destroy it. He was launching balls 110, 111 miles an hour. I think the potential's there to be a 25 home run bat at the major league level. But now you can send him to AAA Nashville, and assuming there's not injuries, which obviously is never guaranteed, but assuming there's not a ton of injuries, you can take your time with Jefferson Chourio and get him ready for the major league level. I don't want to be a doom and gloom kind of person, so I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I am thinking about the fact that Contreras has one more year of pre-arbitration salaries before he hits arbitration for 3 seasons. Last year, he was, some people called him the most valuable player on the team. I know he had 5 WAR, and in the pool of pre-arbitration money that was given out to the $50 million bonus pool, he got $800,000+ in bonuses for his performance. I want to say he was top 10 or 15 in money paid out of that pool. And so if something were to happen financially and they needed to cut even more payroll, Chourio could be ready if they needed to move Contreras. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. I'd like to think they're going to keep him, but just felt like it was important to point out the timing of that. In just a minute, because the hot stove is so slow, there's a lot of trade idea articles coming out, and I found one that was interesting. I want to talk about that next, right here on Locked on MLB Prospects. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. With all of these moves the Brewers have made, and there's still more that they're expected to do. They haven't traded Corbin Burnes yet. They haven't traded Willy Adames yet, and nothing says that they will. But both of those guys are in arbitration and in their final years of team control. So if they were to get moved, it would make a lot of sense if that happened sometime now. I did see a deal suggested between the Dodgers and the Brewers that focused on a pitching prospect and Wisconsin native Gavin Lux going back to the Brewers in exchange for Adames and Burnes. We'll see what happens. But the Brewers are still third best odds to win the NL Central in 2024. The St. Louis Cardinals are at plus 175. They've added a lot of veteran pitchers to that rotation to get innings. The Chicago Cubs are at plus 200. Seems a little bit low to me, but so far in free agency, they've lost more than they've gained. They were in on Ohtani and didn't get him. They're supposedly in on Yamamoto, but I don't know if they're going to get him. But in the meantime, they've lost Cody Bellinger. They've lost Candelario, who they traded for at the deadline. So they're at plus 200. Again, Brewers at 370, Reds at plus 450, and then the Pittsburgh Pirates at plus 2,500. It feels like despite re-signing Andrew McCutchen, which I'm glad they did, I don't necessarily think they're going to be in the mix with these other teams for the Central in 2024. But if you're interested in getting in on this action, download the FanDuel app. Incredibly easy to use. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can see everything, spreads, player props, over-unders, everything that's out for baseball right now. If you want to get some bonus bets, put some money down on the NFL. New customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. So $150 if the team you picked wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Okay, so a couple really interesting trades in this Bleacher Report article. It's called 7 Trade Ideas for MLB's Most Eager Buyers and Sellers from Kerry Miller. I'll try to remember to link this in the episode description and in the show notes. But I found this rather interesting. It starts off with what he says is the tradition of every offseason, the Braves and the Oakland A's making a trade, pointing out Sean Murphy was last year. 2 years ago, it was Matt Olson to Atlanta. So the proposal here is left-hand pitcher Paul Blackburn, with 2 years of arbitration remaining, going to Atlanta in exchange for right-hand pitcher J.R. Ritchie, one of their top 5 or 6 prospects in the system, part of that second wave of pitching prospects behind Hurston Waldrop, behind A.J. Smith-Shawver. Find it really interesting. Something where he was an all-star in 2022, going back to Blackburn, all-star in 2022, looked good in 2023 in stretches, but the team around him wasn't necessarily that great. Thought it was an interesting proposal. Feels like the kind of value buy that Atlanta would make. If you haven't noticed, they like to go out and get players that they think were underperforming because they're in a bad situation, either a bad team or just unhappy where they are. And so I found that an interesting trade idea and wanted to pass that along. They had one for the Yankees and Marlins, and I think this one's going to be a little bit more controversial. They had 3 years of control of lefty Jesus Luzardo going to New York. And in return, Miami would get shortstop Roderick Arias and outfielder Spencer Jones. And this is a big deal, right? Pablo Lopez had 2 years of control, and it took an established major leaguer to make that deal. This is 3 years of control. And in the last 2 seasons for Luzardo, 50 starts, ERA of 3.5, better numbers than I think Lopez put up in the same stretch before he was traded. Now, Luzardo did have a significant injury in 2022, but I can't necessarily imagine what Yankees fans would say about the idea of trading Spencer Jones. Something where I think the most recent MLB Pipeline re-rate, they had him as the number 1 prospect in the system. I want to say Fangraphs may have also had him as the number 1 prospect in the system, but either way, someone where with the uncertainty around is Juan Soto going to re-sign or not. I've seen a lot of people talking about how they're looking forward to the Spencer Jones, Jason Dominguez, Aaron Judge outfield. And I think the willingness to make this trade by the Yankees would come back to, do you think you realistically have a shot to re-sign Juan Soto? If you are not re-signing Juan Soto, I don't think you can get rid of Spencer Jones. And I also don't know if they have an idea of whether or not they're going to be able to get rid of Spencer Jones, to re-sign Juan Soto. And so that's what makes this complicated. I don't know if this happens, but we'll see here. You do have an infielder going to the Boston Red Sox. We've talked on the show before about how the Minnesota Twins have a logjam in the infield. You've got Carlos Correa, you've got Royce Lewis. You're looking at Edward Julian playing some second base and some DH. You've got Brooks Lee just about ready to come up. So they suggest in here Jorge Polanco going from the Twins to the Red Sox. It takes $10.5 million off the books for the Twins in 2024, and then the club option for 25 is $12 million. And in return, the Twins received right-hand pitcher John Schreiber, who has 3 years of arbitration left. It's something where it feels like the Twins at this point, based on what we've heard about the issues with the RSNs and the television deal, what that's going to come out to, and I can cover that on a show once we get a little bit more idea as to what's going to happen. There's supposedly a framework in place for MLB to eventually get the rights back. Amazon's supposedly interested in investing to get involved in all of this. When we have a little more clarity, I think we'll try to tackle this maybe on a Monday mailbag. But thought that was an interesting proposal, and it was something where Schreiber could be a cheap piece for the Twins, but really it's just getting rid of that salary commitment and finding some more playtime. Not sure if that's going to happen or not, but I found it interesting. This one stood out to me with the Los Angeles Angels and the Tampa Bay Rays. And it was the Rays getting rid of more salary. They traded Tyler Glasnow to the Dodgers to free up that $25 million he was owed. This is Brandon Lowe owed $8.75 million in 2024, and then 2 club options in 25 and 26. That moving to Los Angeles. And in return, left-hand pitcher Chase Silseth, who has 6 years of team control remaining, and outfield prospect Yadiel Sanchez, who is a guy that is young enough that would not have to go on Tampa Bay's 40-man roster for a while. We've discussed that roster crunch that Tampa Bay usually has every fall. Wasn't as bad this year, but an interesting trade. This is really just dumping salary. And if the Rays can get back a useful guy with major league control, and in this case, I'm higher on Chase Silseth than I think a lot of people are. I like Chase Silseth. I think that's a deal Tampa Bay would look at simply because you have so many other options you can use at second base, whether it's Curtis Mead, whether it's Jonathan Aranda. You have so many other guys you can play at second base that Brandon Lowe feels like he's an extra piece that you can afford to part with if it gets you long-term control of another arm, right? This was a really interesting one involving a top prospect in baseball, somebody we named in the top lefty pitchers show. The Blue Jays and the White Sox getting together, and it's the Blue Jays getting Eloy Jimenez and Dylan Cease. And in return, it is a 3-prospect package: first baseman Spencer Horwitz, shortstop John Kasevich, and left-hand pitcher Ricky Tiedemann. Now, in the article, they call this an overpay. I think if you're a club that can take on Eloy's salary, it's $13.8 million in 24, and then 2 club option years, $16.5 million and $18.5 million. Yes, it hurts to lose a number 1 prospect. This is the time, if you are going to trade Ricky Tiedemann, this is the time to trade Ricky Tiedemann, because he's had injury issues. He's had stamina issues. There's been questions about how deep can he go into games. And if you can turn around after his Arizona Fall League, where he went 5 or more innings, he went 75 or more pitches in multiple outings and look good. If you can turn around and you can fill 2 spots, a postseason starter spot and a DH that could theoretically cover some time in outfield if you need it, that is an absolute win. And my hot take is I make that trade 7 days a week and Sunday after church. It just seems like a no-brainer there. There was a trade between the Giants and the Guardians. It was Shane Bieber going to the Giants, outfielder Vaughn Brown, and right-hand pitcher Carson Seymour going from the Giants back to Cleveland. I don't know at this point what Shane Bieber is. It feels if you can make the trade and not give up a top 15 prospect or top 10 prospect, maybe you do it. I honestly don't know how valuable 1 year at $12 million of Shane Bieber is, simply because all of these stats on him have been down so much recently. And then I mentioned a Dodgers potential trade for Corbin Burns. They suggest one in here, but without Willy Adames. It's right-hand pitcher Corbin Burns for catcher Diego Cartaya and right-hand pitcher Nick Frasso. I don't think this is a good deal as constructed because, like we talked about, the Brewers seem to be okay at catcher with a young, cost-controlled option, another top prospect behind him, and it's the Brewers. They have Brewers devil magic. They always find a way to make really good catchers and get catchers much better. If you swap out Diego Cartaya for Gavin Lux, and then you put Willy Adames in here, Willy Adames, Corbin Burns for Gavin Lux and Nick Frasso, who some people think might be a reliever, some people think might be a starter. I could see something like that happening. I could see that working out, and it feels like in that situation, it'd be a slam dunk. In just a minute, let's talk about some of the rule changes that MLB put in place, because they're tweaking things a little bit for 2024. We'll talk about that next, right here on Locked on MLB Prospects. Final segment of the Friday show of Locked on MLB Prospects. After this quick reminder, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows, including this one, covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube, subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, and it is coming soon to Roku and Fire TV devices as well. MLB is changing some of the rules for 2024 just to tweak the time a little bit, and some of these aren't necessarily that interesting or that significant. They're small tweaks, and I think ultimately they said 5 minutes is what they were expecting to come down on the time of game for. We saw during the season, the time of a 9-inning game go up by more than 7 minutes. Back in April, games were finishing in 2 hours and 36 minutes. By September, it was 2 hours and 44 minutes. So more than 7 minutes. And they're just tweaking some small things here, right? So with a runner on base, the pitch clock goes from 20 seconds to 18 seconds. That aligns it more closely with what the minor leagues have had. Makes kind of sense to me. I don't think it's a big deal. Obviously, a lot of people are mad about it. Doesn't feel like it's a big deal. They're also cutting down on the number of mound visits from 5 to 4. Now, the rule has been and will still be, if you have used all of your mound visits before the 9th inning, they will give you one extra mound visit in the 9th inning. So that adjustment is being made. But during the course of the season, teams only used more than 4 visits 2% of the time. And so it's not necessarily going to do that much, I think. It's not a situation that's come up a lot. And something that we did see a lot of last year was catchers calling for a mound visit to avoid a pitch clock violation. It would tick down to 2 or to 1, and they'd spring up and run out there to try to avoid a pitch clock violation because the pitcher wasn't ready to throw. Something they're tweaking, like how with the intentional walk, you don't have to actually throw the ball 4 times. You can just signal to first. Same thing. Catchers can call for a mound visit without having to physically get up and walk out to the mound. They can just say, hey, we're going to use mound visit. and it'll stop the clock and they won't get a violation. Again, not going to do a lot there. One of the ones, they also tweaked the runner's lane, something where they're widening the space the runner has to run to first base by about 6 inches. I honestly think it makes a lot more sense to just do the double bag at first base. Have a bag for the runner to run to, have a bag for the fielder. Solves this problem for the most part. You don't have to worry about where are you in relation to the line. You're just supposed to run to your bag. But that's me. That's not everybody. A lot of folks are against the double bag. It's fine. Something that I found interesting that I think is you're going to see gamed a little bit in 2024 is the new rule about pitching changes. So previously, as you remember, we've had the 3 batter minimum in MLB. If you entered the game, no matter what, unless you were injured and could not continue, you had to face 3 batters. Now, there is an addendum to that. Even if you've faced 3 batters, if you come out at the start of an inning and you take your warm-up pitches on the mound, you are required to face 1 batter. This wasn't a huge issue last season. 24 times in the regular season and twice in the World Series, you had an issue where a pitcher warmed up between innings and then ended up not actually facing a hitter in that inning. They came out of the game before that. A pitching change took place after they had warmed up on the mound. Now, the place I think you're going to see gamesmanship of this, and I remember this happening, I think like a couple times, is when that pitching change is made because of a pinch hitter, right? You have a righty batter coming up, and so your righty reliever stays out there. He's already hit his 3 batter minimum. So he goes out there to warm up for the next inning. Once he's started warming up, once he's thrown that first pitch, he is now locked in. And you can now go and put a pinch hitter in the game. You can put a lefty in, or if it's a lefty you can go to whatever you want to do. You can put a pinch hitter in and lock that pitcher into staying in the game and facing that batter. They don't have an option now. They will have to stay in that game because all you have to do for the pinch hitter is you have to announce them before the at-bat. You can have a righty in the on-deck circle, and then you can pull him back and send the pinch hitter up there once the pitcher started warming up, and it's okay. And so my prediction, I'm making right here on the show, this happened, if you include the World Series, this happened 26 times last season. My prediction is that in 2024, this will happen at least 50, because this is going to be something where now teams are going to intentionally attempt to delay the decision or the announcement of a pinch hitter until after the opposing pitcher has started to warm up. It's the Streisand effect. Once you draw attention to this, everybody's going to start to do it, and either MLB is going to change the rules mid-season to find this is the cutoff time to announce a pinch hitter to begin an inning. They're either going to put a rule like that into place, or it's going to happen 50 times next year. So just watch. Fantastic week this week. Reminder, we are going to have a show on Monday. I know it is Christmas. I know it is a holiday, but something we do on this show is we give the people what they want. If you have questions for us for the Monday mailbag, if you have comments, show ideas, anything like that, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. We've got an email, Discord, subtext, all in the episode description, all in the show notes. Go check it out down there. It's in a link tree. While you're down there, we also have a podcast survey. I want to hear from you. What is important? What do you want to hear about? What should we do more of? What should we do less of? Please give me your feedback. It doesn't collect any personal information. I'm the only one who reads these, but I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, enjoy the weekend. If we don't talk to you, Merry Christmas. And remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.